In this video, we're going to talk about the concept of slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form is basically an equation that represents a line, okay? But it's written in a very specific manner. So that manner looks something like this. I've written to the side as well, but it's written as y equals mx plus b. Now the beauty of that is that when y is isolated, y is all by itself, there are two very important pieces here, the m and the b. Okay, so those key parts, the m and the b, m stands for slope. Okay, it's the rise over run. So just like you were calculating slope earlier, counting slope, okay, that is that slope value, the number right in front of the x, that coefficient. The b value is the y-intercept. Okay, that's where the graph is going to cross the y-axis. So for example, if we had a line like y equals negative 2/3 x plus 6, I can ask you questions like, what is the slope? And what is the y-intercept? Okay, so if y is all by itself, which in our case it is, all we need to do is look to the coefficient of x. So the number sitting in front of the x is our slope. So our slope here is negative 2/3. And then, that's a negative there. And then our y-intercept is the constant. Okay, the number all by itself. So our y-intercept here is 6. Here's another example. So tell me, what is the slope and the y-intercept? So our slope, again, is the number in front of the x. Our y-intercept is the constant. So 7. Okay, so you take a second, think about the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so if you answered the slope is 2, because that's the number in front of the x term, you are correct. If you answered the y-intercept is negative 3, you are correct. That is the constant. So we care about the slope and the y-intercept because it actually helps us graph. So let's think about the equation y equals 2x minus 2. All right, so if I think about the y equals 2x minus 2, I know my slope is 2 and my y-intercept is negative 2. That's what we just figured out. So the way we can use this is we're going to graph the y-intercept first. Okay, that's my y-intercept, meaning that's where it intersects this y-axis right here. So at negative 2, my line is going to cut through the axis. Okay, now my slope here is 2. Remember, we can write any number as a fraction. So really, it's talking about 2 over 1. That tells me I want to rise 2 and run 1. Okay, so we always rise, we're going to rise 2, and we want to run 1. We always run to the right. Once I have those 2 points, then I can draw my line in. There's my line. Let's see how that works again. Okay, so we have y equals 2x minus 3. So I'm going to quickly identify my slope is 2. My y-intercept is negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remember I'm plotting my y-intercept first. So I'm going to plot my negative 3 first. Then I'm going to use my slope. My slope is 2, or remember 2 over 1. It tells me I'm going to go up 2 because it's a positive number and run 1 to the right. So from that y-intercept, I'm running up 2 and running 1 to the right. Those are my 2 points, which then will allow me to graph my line. Another example. I'm going to go ahead and change this real quick. I want to make this a negative 1/4 here. All right, so my slope, in our case, my slope is negative 1/4. My y-intercept is 2. So think about where we want to plot our first point. Our first point is our y-intercept. So I want to plot a point at 2. Okay, now with my slope, That tells me 1/4, negative 1/4 tells me I want to move down 1 and over 4. I'm going to plot my point right there. So the negative tells me to go down because it's, and then a positive would tell me to go up. I'm going to go ahead and draw in my line then. And that's the beauty of slope-intercept form. Okay, now it's your turn. I know you're not going to be graphing, but I want you to think about all the different components. So first, think about the slope and the y-intercept. Think about what those values are. If you said 3 and -1, you are correct. Okay, so now which am I going to graph first, the slope or the y-intercept? If you said y-intercept, you are correct. So I'm going to go ahead and plot my first point at -1 on my y-axis. Okay, now the next question is, think about that slope. That's really 3/1. Am I going to rise or am I going to fall with this slope? So if you said rise, you're correct. So it tells me I'm going to move up 3 because it's positive, and over 1 unit, that's my second point. And here's my line. Another thing that's simple when you know the slope and the y-intercept is actually writing that equation. So if I tell you the slope of a line is -5 and the y-intercept is 2, we can think about just plugging the m and the b into our slope-intercept form. So keep in mind, I just want to replace the m, I just want to replace the b. Y and x are going to just be y and x. So y equals, instead of m, I want to write in -5, leave my x, and it says plus b, so my b in this case is 2. So this is the equation that would have a slope of -5 and a y-intercept of 2. Something I want to throw out there is I could have also written my b value, could have also written that as a coordinate 0, 2. This means when x equals 0, think about it, x equals 0, y equals 2, that is your y-intercept. So when x is 0, this value right here, that is your b value. Okay, so something just to keep in mind there. But the key part here is that x has to be a 0. Otherwise, it's not a y-intercept. Okay, now it's your turn. Write the equation with a line that's represented by the slope of -5 and has a y-intercept of 2. If you said the equation is y equals -5x plus 2, you are correct. Here's where it involves a little bit more work, but it's still not horrible. Sometimes we're given equations such as, let's say 2y equals 3x plus 16. Okay, y is not quite by itself yet. We have to isolate that. Okay, so think about our solving rules and what we did with formulas. So if I want to get y by itself, I really need to divide by 2. But I have to divide every single term by 2. When I do that, I get y equals, this is just the fraction 3/2 x plus 8. Okay, so we're really going to be looking at getting y by itself, isolating the y so that it's in slope-intercept form, because then once it's in slope-intercept form, I know from this case that the slope is 3/2 and our y-intercept is 8. Okay, if I want to rewrite this in slope-intercept form, keep in mind I want to isolate my y. I'm going to isolate my y, so I need to get rid of the 4x. So I need to subtract 4x from both sides. So y would equal -4x plus 8. So is y by itself? Yep. So we are in slope-intercept form. So now we can identify our slope is the number in front of the x, which is -4. My y-intercept is 8. Okay, now it's your turn. Go ahead and rewrite your equation. Okay, so just rewrite your equation to put it in slope-intercept form. Okay, if you subtracted 6x from both sides, had y equals negative 6x plus 9, then you are correct. Take a minute now, answer, what is the slope of the line, and then what is the y-intercept of that line? So your slope is going to be in front of the x, that's negative 6. The y-intercept is 9. It's my constant. Here's another example. This one's a little bit more, a few more steps. But again, our goal is to get y by itself. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of the x. So I would like to subtract 3x from both sides. So I have negative 2y is equal to negative 3x plus 6. Now, the y term is isolated, but y is not by itself yet. So I need to get rid of that negative 2. So negative 2 and y are being multiplied, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. But when I do that, I am really dividing every single term by a negative 2. So y equals, and watch this here, negative 3 divided by negative 2. Negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that's 3 halves x. And then we have 6 divided by a negative 2, which is negative 3. Okay, so again, the beauty of this is that I can identify my slope and my y-intercept. So my slope here is going to be 3 halves. My y-intercept is negative 3. Okay, now you try one of the multi-step ones. Go ahead and solve and put it in slope-intercept form. All right, so first thing we would have to do is subtract a 5x. I want to subtract 5x from both sides. So I'm left with negative 3y equals negative 5x plus 9. I need to divide both sides by negative 3. So I have y equals negative divided by negative is a positive, so it's 5/3 x. And then 9 divided by negative 3 gives me negative 3. Okay, so take a second here, identify your slope and your y-intercept. Okay, so our slope is the number in front of the x, so that's going to be 5/3. And then my constant is my y-intercept, so that's negative 3. Keep in mind what that would be again. The b is my y-intercept, so negative 3 is my y-intercept. My slope is 5/3. It tells me to rise 5 and run 3. So I'd rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and run 3. There'd be my second point. And there's my line. Okay, so this, even though it's not written in slope-intercept form, once I was able to take it to slope-intercept form, then I could graph the line.